at 34 Fairview Road at your uncle's house, January 28th and the 29th. At any point in time, did you see John O'Keefe at that house, come into that house, around that house, at any point in time that you were there?
Never.
You know what a phone extraction is? And he says, not familiar. This, it's tough to say. This looks to me like one of these sentences up here, the that's not true, or the no reason. He says, not familiar, what a phone extraction is. Of course, with as dull as Colin is, I wouldn't put it past him to not be familiar with that, but I think he is familiar with it. September 2023, Michael Proctor's partner, a man by the name of Yuri Buchanan, you know that name? Yeah. He contacted you and said he wanted to talk to you about text messages, correct? And he says, I don't remember. So that is interesting. We haven't seen it, and I don't remember in a while. This looks to be deceptive, but we're going to want confirmation on this. And I wrote in here, he may have phrased it differently. When you get an I don't remember, that is an indicator, but it's not definitive deception in and of itself. He contacted you and said he wanted to talk about your text messages. He may have called him and said, I'd like to interview you, or I'd like to talk to you. He may have said about something else. The way this is phrased might have gotten a less sensitive, I don't remember out of him. But then he's going to start to push.
September of 2023, Michael Proctor's partner, a man by the name of Yuri Buchanan, you know that name?
Yeah.
He contacted you and said he wanted to talk about your text messages, correct?
I don't remember.
Do you remember that you told Yuri Buchanan when he asked about the text messages, you did not have the screenshot anymore. You sent it to your father, Chris.
I don't remember that.
Do you recall telling Yuri Buchanan if he wanted to get the screenshot, you weren't going to give it to him, he'd have to get it from your dad?
Do not remember that.
Do you remember that you told Yuri Buchanan when he asked about the text messages, you did not have the screenshot anymore, you sent it to your father, Chris? Now he says, I don't remember that. You get the I don't remember, but you get the extra word on the end, which is an indicator of deception. He does remember this. Do you recall telling Yuri Buchanan if you wanted to get the screenshot, you weren't going to give it to him? You'd have to get it from your dad. He says, do not remember that. This is extremely sensitive. He left off the I and uncontracted, the do not, in the remember that. As we get closer and closer to bringing his father into this, the language gets more and more deceptive and more sensitive. You remember Trooper Buchanan agreeing with you and saying, sure, I'll just call your dad and get it from him. Don't remember that. So again, highly sensitive. He clearly does remember that. You certainly don't remember ever giving Trooper Buchanan a copy of that screenshot. And he says, no, I don't remember. And this is interesting. I had to go back and watch this. No, I don't remember is not the hard tag of deception that uncontracting the do not is. It doesn't necessarily mean that he does remember it. You certainly don't remember ever giving Trooper Buchanan a copy of that screenshot. And he says, no, I don't remember. And then he says, and then Jackson says, because you didn't, did you? He says, I do not remember, but you did give it to your dad, right? I do not remember. So this is very clear what's going on here, that he gave it to his dad and then told anybody else that they wanted to get it, they had to get it from his dad. You still have that same phone? Yes. If you had the actual text on your phone, why did you provide law enforcement with just the screenshots? I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure is another deception tag. I want to draw your attention to February 26th, that same month, less than a month after the incident. You were at a place called Fenway Johnny's with your buddies, weren't you? Correct. You see that photograph that's being displayed? Yes. What do you notice about your right hand? It's cut up. Your knuckles are injured, correct? Correct. And on February 26th, less than a month after the incident at Fairview, that's what you look like, correct? Correct. Before we read this, when I was a federal agent, I wasn't doing investigations. I was doing tactical work. There was many a day when I came home with knuckles that looked just like Colin Albert's there. I'll tell you, the knuckles heal pretty fast. All the sensitivity that we're going to see in here and all the deception, all of that being said, what you're seeing in that picture is not from January 29th. Attorney Jackson knows that because he says in one of his questions that you re-injured your knuckles at some point. It's very clear to Attorney Jackson the truth, which is that a month after that happening, your knuckles wouldn't look like that anymore. They would be perfectly healed. Just keep that in mind. If at this point you've been looking at that picture and people have been insinuating or telling you that that's from that incident, it's definitely not. That's just the truth. Let's look at this statement. How did you get those injuries? I was at a party, my house party, my senior year, and I remember it being icy out. And I was kind of like a steep hill of a driveway. And I was walking up the driveway and I slipped down the driveway. And I tried to catch myself, but I had something in my left hand. So I had to try to brace myself with my right hand, and I ended up sliding a little bit down the driveway. That's his statement. So if you're watching my interrogation course, my class, in those videos, I discuss a phrase. Is it possible that everything that they say in their statement is true and that the incident still happened? And let's look at what he's actually saying here. I was at a party, my house party, my senior year. It appears that he was at his own house, at a party at his own house. He may be utilizing a memory and just retooling it. That's pretty common, to try to use something that you do remember and then change the details in it to make it fit the situation that you're in. And he says, I remember it being icy out. This is foreshadowing. Whenever you have foreshadowing in a statement, it means that the entire statement is deceptive and not true. The fact that we see this here actually just completely negates this entire statement. We could just move on. But let's look at the rest, the indicators of deception. He stumbles, he says, it was, and then he says, like a, and then he adds in kind of in here. He repeats this whole sentence twice, and that is hugely deceptive. So a steep hill of a driveway, which means that he was on a normal driveway. Then he says, I was walking up the driveway and I slipped down the driveway. He probably slipped going up his own driveway at some point in his life, and he's remembering that. He probably remembers that he slammed his hands down when he did that, and is thinking, that's probably the best story I have in my memory that I could retool in order to make it work here. And I tried to catch myself, but I had something in my left hand. This something, you would usually get the detail there. If he's pulling this from memory, then he would say, I had whatever he had in his left hand. That is a detail that would come in here because it's very, very pertinent to why he injured his right hand. But when you say something, it means this is coming out of your imagination and you just haven't picked an item yet. So you got an indicator of sensitivity here. I had to tried. You got some repetition here to brace myself with my right hand. And I ended up sliding a little bit down the driveway. So where exactly did he say that he scraped his knuckles? Exactly nowhere. He does not indicate that he was injured at all in this statement, which means that he wasn't injured at all in this statement. So here we have a prior memory that he has retooled because it seems to fit this scenario okay. That's why you're getting I in here over and over again. That's how I know that this is a memory that he pulled and retooled, because he does remember walking up his driveway and slipping and sliding down the driveway a little bit, but it's completely unrelated to this incident. And he wasn't injured when that happened. Now let's go into the rest of these questions here. A bunch of questions about that. What did you have in your left hand? If I remember, it was either my phone or a beverage. It takes a lot of mental energy to fabricate. If you're going to say your phone, you have to figure out, does that work in that scenario? Like, would I have my phone in my left hand? But he doesn't have time. He ends up saying both. The first thing that comes to his mind, what would he have in his hand? His phone or a beverage? So he just says both. He's, I don't know. It was this or a beverage. So you got repetition here. If I remember, which he doesn't because it's made up, is what I'm getting at there. So according to you, you fell on the ice, injured your knuckles. See, I wish you would have picked up on this because he does not say that he injured his knuckles. As we just saw in the photograph, right across the top of your knuckles. Correct. You fed him the leading question. He says correct. As you fell onto the pavement, the asphalt. Yes. And you braced yourself when you fell, your entire body weight by putting your right hand down on your fist, and you injured your right fist, just the top of your knuckles on your right fist when you fell down. Correct. Again, he fed him the whole answer. Seriously? You didn't put your palms down when you fell? No. Let's take a side note here as an interrogator. When you're dealing with an individual like Colin Albert, you have to recognize who you're talking to and the way that they answer. Colin Albert cannot answer open-ended questions. He stumbles all over his answers. He even has trouble with his rehearsed answers. You got to keep asking open-ended questions. You just have to, because he is just going to take whatever you give him. You fell with your entire body weight on your fist and just injured the top portion of your knuckles, correct? Again, correct. And then here's my no. These are all closed-ended leading questions that Colin is just accepting. Funny, because I wrote these notes yesterday, and I got up today to make the video, and it's funny to see this, and I think like I'm thinking this for the first time, and then I read my notes, and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I said right there. You've never been in a fight? No. So this is rehearsed. We know that he's going to say this, and we know that that's rehearsed. Your entire life, Other than with my brothers? No. Okay, so now we get the rehearsed statement. And then he says, no. Never hurt your knuckles before? Not sure what you mean. He says, never hurt your knuckles in a fight? No. Again, he can say that because this is rehearsed and he's prepared for it. He's mentally been preparing for that level of stress from that question for however long. And in this case, when you fell down on the asphalt, it was only the top of your knuckles on the right hand, correct? Correct. You're right-handed or left-handed? Right hand. Do you box? No. That's a vague question. He's still prepared for that, but it's a vague question. I'm sorry, you don't box? And he says, nope. All right, so nope. He has transitioned in his mind here from the rehearsed statements. For some reason, he says, I'm sorry, you don't box? He transitioned out of his rehearsed statements here. It would have been really easy for him to stay in that mindset and say no. But he actually says a deceptive statement here. Nope. You've never boxed? And he says never. All right, so we are definitely out of his rehearsed section here because never is an indicator of deception. You've never practiced boxing. He says, I've hit the bag for like cardio, but other than that, no. I put over explains here. So he's giving you an explanation of the injuries. These two statements here, he felt like his rehearsed statement didn't fit there. All right, we'll keep going. And you hit the bag. Is that considered boxing? And he says, I wouldn't say so. Not really. Clearly, hitting the bag, he does consider that to be part of boxing. That means he has probably taken boxing classes and began hitting the bag in those boxing classes. So he has an association with hitting the bag and boxing classes. He says, it's hitting a bag, correct? Yeah, that's boxing, right? And then he says, I'd say yeah. So here he's contradicting himself. So you hit a bag, is that considered boxing? And he says, I wouldn't say so. Not really. And then is hitting a bag, correct? Yes, it's boxing, right? I'd say yeah. So now we know this is deception here. He does consider it boxing. When that photograph was taken at Fenway Johnny's, those knuckles look like they'd been re-injured from a prior injury. All right, so here you have the evidence that Attorney Jackson does not believe that that injury actually came from January 29th. No, just falling on asphalt, correct. Any other cuts or scrapes or injuries from that fall? I don't remember. Of course he doesn't remember. It was made up. He hasn't fabricated that part of the story yet. I don't remember it's a truthful statement there. There's nothing to remember. Oh yeah, I wrote that. There's nothing to remember. The I don't remember here confirms that the entire story is fabricated. Just your knuckles? Yeah. Said you've never been in a fight before? Nope. So that's a lie. He has been in a fight. Is that you? Yes. It's a picture. Okay. When was that taken? Maybe my sophomore year in high school. This is a lie. It was not taken his sophomore year in high school. This is in reference to the videos that they showed in court. Were you sophomore year in high school about 4 years ago? Yeah. Around. He says around, which means it's not actually sophomore year. It was around sophomore year. And he says it twice. Saying around your sophomore year would have to be either freshman or junior year. He's actually being deceptive here when he says around. He says around, which is an indicator that around is not sophomore year, but it's repeated. This is deception. This means that he remembers that it was his senior year. Okay. You indicated on cross-examination you've never been in a fight. No. Okay, so he says no here. He says no like he's agreeing with it, but you indicated in cross-examination that you've never been in a fight. He says no, he did not indicate that. But his tone must have led Attorney Jackson to believe that he said yes or that he meant yes here, indicating that you had no violent tendencies, right? No. Again, no. The answer to that should be yes. Indicating that you have no violent tendencies? No.
You indicated on cross-examination you've never been in a fight.
No.
Indicating that you have no violent tendencies and no violent proclivities, right?
Nope.
What were you saying on that video? That I would beat them up? Did you say that you would beat them up or did you say that you would F them up? Now, he actually says F them up, and then Attorney Jackson says, you didn't say F them up, but I'm not going to actually swear on this video because I want to make this friendly for all audiences. So says, I will F you up, that I would F them up. You also said something about beating someone's ass, right? Correct. What did that mean? That I would beat them up. So when you said, I will F you up and I will beat your ass, was that a friendly invitation? No. Was that a threat? Correct? I don't know if I would call it a threat. You don't? I'm not sure. We have the repeating the not sure, which is a way of him being deceptive anyways, but even saying that he's not sure feels deceptive to him. Is this a threat? He says, I don't know if I would call it a threat. He's not saying it's not, but this is definitely an indicator that he does feel that it's a threat. Were you threatening these Advantage boys, guys, whoever they are? Yeah, kind of. Were you threatening them with violence? Kind of, yeah. In the second video, you said F you a number of times, and then you said KO. You said, pull up, KO, bang, bang, right? Correct. That a threat? Yeah. Now he's eased into it and he's willing to go along with it. He resisted it in the beginning and you saw that sensitivity when he resisted it. So you're threatening them yet again a second time. Yeah. Because when you do, I'm going to F you up, right? Yeah. Meaning you're going to fight and you're going to put you down, correct? Correct. That was your threat to them, correct. When was the second one? The bang bang threat made before or after the Advantage Boys? I'm not sure. It was exactly after. Might have been the same night. I really don't know. So he really does know. Well, you're dressed completely differently, so it's probably not the same night. You would agree with that? And he says, unless I changed, I could have changed my shirt. I do that often. What we're seeing here is a statement that shouldn't be overlooked. To me, that feels like him going back to the night as he's thinking about violence, as he's thinking about beating someone's ass. He talks about changing his shirt often. So changing your shirt often would be because of getting blood on it. And I think he's reliving a moment there when he left the house. He probably had blood on his shirt, which is why he had to leave immediately. He had to get out of there because he left at 12:10. That was when he texted, and that was right at the time when the incident happened. Why would he have to leave so suddenly? Well, clearly, if the whole thing is going to be covered up, he needs to be gone so that Brian Albert and Brian Higgins have a chance to say that he wasn't there. But when you get this statement, I could have changed my shirt. I do that often. So that is really indicative to me that after a fight, he changes his shirt. So you changed your shirt on the same night. You just decided to threaten the guys twice. So that's what you're saying? And he says, maybe. So again, maybe another indicator that what he's saying is not true. Was it around the same time frame? And he says around. Yeah. When he says around, it means it was not at the same time. We've seen that 4 times now, and that's very definitive. When he says around, he means it's not at the same time. All right. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Albert, you do like to fight, don't you? Nope. All right. Here, if there's any question that nope is a lie, that should be answered for you right here, because this is a very definitive indicator of deception. And it really helps us to know with certainty that every time he says nope, he's lying. You showed up at another hearing, at another proceeding to testify, and you showed up with busted knuckles then too, didn't you? Do not remember. Okay, so he does remember. July 27th. You remember being in another hearing? Yes. You remember the questions about the condition of your fists? Yeah. They were asking because you had open injuries on your right knuckles yet again, didn't you? Correct. You said must have been hitting the heavy bag, right? Yeah. Boxing again? Hitting the bag, yeah. Just working out, right? Yep. Didn't have any injuries on your left hand though, did you? No. When you work out on a heavy bag, you wrap your hands, don't you? I do not. No, that's a lie. He does wrap his hands. From my own personal experience, when we had boxing days, I would go in, I had hand wraps, and we would go in and we'd wrap up, and then we'd box and we'd hit the bags and do the whole 9 yards, and my knuckles would be fine. But there was a lot of cardio training days where we were practicing boxing maneuvers and mixed martial arts maneuvers, but it wasn't meant to be combat training. That was our cardio training, but we ended up hitting the bag a lot. On those days, my knuckles would be busted up. All this tells you is that he fights a lot and he works out a lot. It doesn't necessarily mean that he boxes other people in the ring, but he definitely does boxing training. And he has days where he wraps his hands when he goes to boxing class. And when he's just working out, maybe without his trainer, his boxing coach or whatever, when he's just working out on his own, he probably doesn't wrap his hands. But it says when you work out on the heavy bag, you wrap your hands, don't you? And he says, I do not, which means that most of the training that he does on the heavy bag during class is with his hands wrapped. I see. So only your right hand gets injured over and over and over and over again, not your left hand. And he says, I'm not sure. That's a definitive lie. He uses it as a deception tag. Even though you're punching the bag with both hands. I'm not sure. You're right-handed, aren't you? Yes. So when you throw a haymaker, your hardest punch, that's with your right fist, right? I would say they have equal, they're equal. I don't know. I'm not sure. He starts deceptive, I would say, but he actually has too much trouble saying that they're equal because he's clearly so right-hand dominant that he even has trouble lying about it. He wants to say, I would say they're equal, but he can't actually get it out. He says, I would say they have equal, they're equal. And he says, I don't know. And then he just goes to, I'm not sure. So he does know, and he knows that he's heavily right-handed. Okay, Mr. Albert, as far as the videos you make and sent to that group, were there any videos from that group that were made and sent to you? He says, text messages. The duplicating of text here indicates that he receives text messages, but he also receives videos as well. And with regard to those text messages, generally speaking, what are they saying? Just name calling. He says, just name calling me and my friends, calling us names and stuff like that. Did you even really know these kids, what their names were or anything like that? Not at all. He's not saying, no, I didn't, or I don't. He's not at all indicates to me that he doesn't know all their names, but he knows the names of some of them. And was there any sort of physical fight or any even physical altercation with these other kids? Never. So there was either a fight or some sort of physical altercation. Again, you got this double question. This is why I like simpler questions, simple direct questions, because when you get a deception indicator, you know exactly what it's to. So never. So one of these is true. Did you ever even meet them face to face? Never. So they did meet face to face. There was an altercation. And with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, your neighbor who lived at the top of the street when you lived at Seven Meadows, you ever threatened him? Never. So we now know definitively that he did threaten Mr. O'Keefe. So this is a long road to get here, but we're getting good information. I have to reiterate this because it's so important. Colin Albert definitively knows, remembers, and did threaten John O'Keefe. Did he ever threaten you? Never. Interesting. John O'Keefe threatened Colin Albert as well, probably all on the same night, on the 29th. But let's keep going. Ever have any sort of back and forth exchange similar to what was up on the screen? Never. So yeah, they did. You indicated, Mr. Albert, that this was your sophomore year in high school, but you were asked that exact same question under oath, the time frame of these videos in that other hearing, weren't you? I believe so, yes. You indicated under oath in that hearing that it looked like it was your junior or senior year in high school, correct? I'm maybe, so indicator of deception. I'm not sure exactly what I said. So we have duplicating of I'm not. We have a double I. We have an indicator from maybe, and then we have I'm not sure, which is a deception tag for him. Exactly what I said. If you watch his testimony, and you don't need to watch it, you're going to watch it right now.
You indicated under oath in that hearing that it looked like it was your junior or senior year in high school, correct?
Maybe I'm not sure
Not sure.
exactly what I said.
Your senior.
You see that one-sided shoulder shrug. That one-sided shoulder shrug is a definitive indicator of deception. Now that you've seen a one-sided shoulder shrug in combination with these, you definitively know that all of these are indicators of deception, and that's good. We want to confirm that what we're seeing, it's deception and that it's consistent through his entire statement. Your senior year, we saw already that it was his senior year. He said around, now he says this. We know with certainty it was his senior year. Okay, your senior year would have been, the same year John O'Keefe died, yeah. Mr. Albert, before we took a break, you had mentioned that you'd never been in a fight, correct? You stand by that testimony, correct? Approximately, when was that video taken? Around my sophomore year, so he still can't say it. Did you previously testify in a different hearing back in June? Yes. That hearing, you said you believe that it was taken closer to your junior or senior year, correct? Correct. What did you mean by I'm going to F you up, that I was going to beat them up? Actually, you didn't say beat them up. But you've never been in a fight. Never. All right, quickly he has. You indicated, and what is the bang bang? He says, I'm not sure. That's a deception tag. Then he says, honestly, you have a deception tag that's married up with another indicator of deception. Everyone knows what that means. Everyone. It means I'm going to kill you. Bang bang. And Attorney Jackson does that as he's asking the question. He says, what does it mean when you say bang bang?
KO, bang bang, right?
Correct.
Bang. And then he says, I'm not sure, honestly. We all know what that means. But again, we have confirmation that he does know what that means, that this is a deception tag. You were just talking about knocking somebody out, correct? The bang bang just sort of flowed. Exactly. When he says exactly, it means he just got let off the hook. This is one step above correct. It's like correct and thank you for letting me off the hook. Was that a threat? Yes. Okay, so when you throw your hardest punch, that's with your right hand. We're going back to this line of questioning again. I'd say, I'm not sure. That's a deception tag. I'd say they're equal. He wishes they were equal. Allie McCabe, not your cousin, correct? Correct. Now we have questioning by ADA Lolly. So she's your friend who you have relatives in common with. Is that correct? Correct. What I'm going to ask you about is purely about Trooper Michael Proctor. How many times have you seen him in your life? Maybe 5 or 6 times. Again, with the maybe, clearly he's seen him a lot more than that. And when about would those be? And what would the nature of those interactions? Other than when I got interviewed last time with Trooper Proctor and one of his partners, other than that, I didn't see him for years. I want to say since I was a young kid. He wants to say since he was a young kid, since that's another indicator. So clearly he's seen him quite a bit more. Okay. And when you were a young kid, just so we're clear, as far as young, about how young is young, maybe I saw him, I could have seen him at like a football game or something. But other than that, like pretty young, like 12, 11, 13 years old. There's huge sensitivity here. We have maybe, which is a lie. It's an indicator of deception. And then we have a bunch of, I could have seen him. This is reducing commitment, like a football game, reducing commitment. Something is reducing commitment, like, means none of these are accurate. So he says 12, 11, but he's going the wrong direction. He wants to say that he was young, but in his mind, he's so far away from reality that he says 12, 11, 13 years old. So it's like he was 13 years old, which means he's seen him more than that. And what was the context in which you've seen him? Was it you and him together? Was it as a group, as a family thing? He says, we've been over the grandmother's house a couple times, but that's pretty much the only time I would see him. I would see him. That's an indicator. Oops. So, and pretty much that's a reduction in commitment. He uses we, which means they're close. We don't want to forget that. We's are important. He uses it twice here. They're a lot closer than he's letting on. That's the bottom line there. Have you received any sort of training in boxing, taking classes, or anything like that? Keep in mind, this is from 88 Lolly. These are meant to be the softballs. And he says never. He clearly has taken boxing classes or some sort of MMA or something like that. But something you do as part of your workout, correct? Correct. Well, yeah, of course. If you do that, it's also part of your workout. Now, as far as those videos that you were just shown, how old were you? He says around 16. So 17 or 18. I'd say around 16 years old. He has to say it twice. Around 16, I'd say around 16 years old. So you believe it was sometime in your sophomore year of school? Yes, that's what I believe. He says yes, but he doesn't really have a way of saying yes in which he's comfortable lying. So he can't just say yes, even if it's rehearsed. He has to put a qualifier. Yes, that's what I believe. He doesn't say, I believe so. Yes, he says, that's what I believe. That's sort of a definitive, don't hold me to this statement. You recall what the argument was about with this other group of kids from the hockey club? Yeah, it was the girls in our friend group, a couple of the girls in our friend group, like hung out. He says, yeah. He says, it was the girls in our friend group, as honest and direct. Then he's thinking it wasn't all of them. Then he just rephrases it, a couple of the girls in our friend group. And then this is an exaggeration, like he's saying it's like they hung out with them a few times. Clearly, they did something more than just hang out. That's an indicator of sensitivity. Like, that's an indicator that what he's telling you is not exactly the truth, but it's something like it. So like all of my guy friends got a little salty about it. They did something a little more serious than hang out. And the guys got a little more upset than salty, is what he's saying. That's why we kind of sent videos back and forth. Now, if you remember earlier, he said that it was just texts. He said text. Now he says they sent videos back and forth. Teenage kids arguing about girls? Exactly. So he was let off the hook by who's trying to trivialize this. Now, this is exactly what I wanted to see. It's exactly what you wanted to see. This is what everybody was waiting for here. And it's from ADA Lolly. Let's have him ask those pertinent questions. At any point in time, did your friend group and this hockey team ever meet up at all? Never. Okay, we already know that's a lie. We already saw that before. He answered it the same way before. Never. They definitely did meet up. And you indicated that you've never really been in a fight except for with your brothers, correct? So he's just taking what he gives them. Now with regard to John O'Keefe, your neighbor who lived a couple doors down, did you ever threaten John? Never. O'Keefe ever threaten you? Never. Ever get in an argument about girls? No. He doesn't say never. He says no. This is what everyone's been waiting to see. Is there any way that we can definitively say that we know something from this statement? And the answer is yes. Yes, we can. Because we know that no and never mean two different things to Colin Albert. He is lying when he says never, like everybody else. And sometimes he's lying when he says no, but sometimes he's being honest. He's lying when he says no if he's had a chance to rehearse it. But this is a truthful no. There is a difference between a truthful no and a never. So, did you ever get in an argument about girls? I love this because Lolly is trying to be funny and he's trying to diffuse the situation and he's trying to throw in another negative question in there and try and lighten the mood for Colin Albert. And all he does is give us definitive confirmation that Colin Albert could have said no here, but didn't. He chose not to say no. There is a difference between did you ever get in an argument about girls and were you ever threatened by John? Or did you ever threaten John? Okay, any animus or any conflict that you can recall ever between yourself and Mr. O'Keefe? Never. which means yes, there's animus between them. Now, you were asked some questions whether or not you've been thinking about this case for the last 2.5 years. You recall this? Yes. And you indicated that you had not, correct? And you indicated in your testimony in response to that questioning, essentially, not until people were writing things about you on the internet, correct? Correct. Can you explain to the jury sort of what occurred? Okay, so he finally goes back and gives him the ability to talk about his rehearsed statement here. He says, about what's written on the internet, I'd say about a year, a little over a year, it started. Again, he says started. So again, he didn't start following this at that point. He had been following it the whole time. Started when people on Twitter, Instagram, social media were just coming at my family, calling us murderers, harassing us. This sounds just like Jen McCabe showing up at our doorsteps, our sports games. I mean, we couldn't leave the house. So he's over exaggerating this. Even though this is rehearsed, Colin Albert is not nearly as good at his rehearsed statements as like Jen McCabe was. So we couldn't leave the house without people taking pictures of us. And it's very terrible. Play that back in your mind for a second. And it's very terrible. Does that sound like something Colin Albert would say? No, it's part of the rehearsed statement. It's very terrible. And how long is that going on for? The past year and change, a couple of months, past year and a couple months, I'd say. To be clear, that night that you were at 34 Fairview Road at your uncle's house, January 28th and 29th, at any point in time, did you see John O'Keefe at the house, come into the house, around that house at any point in time? That you never. So now we get confirmation that John O'Keefe, that Colin Albert did see him go into the house. Let's recap what we've looked at here. We were able to establish a baseline of what it looks like when Colin Albert is being deceptive and what it looks like when he's being truthful. And they really buried the lead here because they asked all the hard questions at the end and gave us lots of time to get a good baseline on exactly what Colin Albert likes to say when he's being deceptive. He says the word maybe, he says really, would, never. These are actually things that everybody does. There's not many deception tags that are specific to Colin Albert other than I'm not sure. I'm not sure is in and of itself a reduction in commitment. That's a very sensical deception tag. He says around when he means not at that point. Oh yeah, this is Sergio's theory. I don't have any indicators in here that tie changing his shirt to anything. There's nothing that directly ties this statement to John O'Keefe. However, the fact that it's on his mind, there's a principle that I teach in my course, which is that you can't say something that you're not thinking about. If you said something, it's because you were thinking it. That is important to remember, that you can't actually say words if your brain isn't thinking the thought. When he says, well, you're dressed completely differently, it's probably not the same night. You would agree with that? Most people wouldn't consider that unless they're just trying to sit there and think of what smart aleck things can I possibly come up with. But he says, I could have changed my shirt. I do that often. So why does he do that often? I mean, if he's boxing and working out, if he's getting in fights, all of this seems to just go really hand in hand with that. I would say that if you want to look for evidence, I mean, it's a little late now, but if they would have done their investigation correctly and they would have looked at him quickly, which they should have, they probably would have found a bloody shirt. I didn't think I was going to get anything great from this until I got to the end and I'm like, I don't have to see that in writing to hear never, never, never. I also want you to keep in mind that the bloody knuckles on February 26th was not from January 29th. That was too far away. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And always remember to keep seeking the truth. Don't ever accept what anyone says. Like his statement in here, I slipped on the driveway. Process it yourself and figure out for yourself whether it's truthful or not. That being said, this is Truth Revealed signing off.
Never.
Was there ever any sort of physical fight or even a physical interaction with these other kids?
Never.
Did you ever even meet them face to face?
Never.
With regard to Mr. O'Keefe, your neighbor who lived at the top of the street when you lived at Seven Meadows, you ever threaten him?
Never.
Did he ever threaten you?
Never.
Did you ever have any sort of back and forth exchange similar to what was up on the screen?
Never.
But you've never been in a fight.
Never.
Have you received any sort of training in boxing, taking classes, anything like that?
Never.
And at any point in time, did your friend group and this club hockey team ever meet up at all?
Never.
With regard to John O'Keefe, your neighbor who lived a couple doors down, did you ever threaten John O'Keefe?
Never.
John O'Keefe ever threaten you?
Never.
Did you ever get in an argument about girls?
Nope.
Any animus or any conflict that you can recall ever between yourself and Mr. O'Keefe?
Never.
Here, that night that you were at 34 Fairview Road at your uncle's house, January 28th and the 29th, at any point in time did you see John O'Keefe at that house, come into that house, around that house, at any point in time that you there?
Never.
But in